Okay, so today we're going to discuss competition patterns and the etiquette and what you should be practicing and preparing yourself for ready to perform patterns in competition. Okay, so if you've done a competition before, you'll obviously be aware, but if you haven't, then I'll quickly explain that you'll get an area like the big black square there, maybe possibly slightly bigger, certainly no smaller, and that will be the area that you'll be performing on. At one end, we're going to take it as this end where you're viewing from. There will be a row of judges sat on chairs, usually 5, but they can be 3. It's an odd number so that when they vote on which person they think performed the best pattern, there should always be a winner unless any of the judges votes on a draw. So what you've got to remember is it is a competition, so you are competing. And you are competing against the other people that are performing their patterns. So once you step foot onto the area, you have to compete and try and be better at the other person at every single thing. Okay, what I try and always get the students to do is, even when you are walking onto the mat, try and walk onto the mat better than the other person. When you are standing ready, try and stand better and smarter than the other person. So let's go through it. Obviously, you want to try and make yourself look as smart and as nice as you possibly can, so always make sure your belt is tied correctly and your dobok is nice and cleaned and ironed. And then when they call your name up to perform your pattern, you may be sat on the side of the area or at the back over here. When they call your name, you stand up, yes sir, or yes ma'am, depending on if they're male or female. Walk across to the mat, bow, and then smartly walk into position and stand nice and tall and look confident. You may be feeling nervous, but you've got to try and be as confident as you possibly can. Okay, so shoulders back, head up, standing nice and smartly, and when you walk on, act really confidently. There's a little thing called the duck syndrome where you may be all panicky inside, but outside you've got to portray confidence. So the duck syndrome comes from a duck that's floating nicely across the water, but underneath the water his legs are going like this because it wants to get across faster, because maybe it sees a danger coming. But above the water it still looks calm and collective. Okay, so that is how you're going to come onto the area. You're going to stand smartly in position. If you get asked a question, such as which pattern you're going to perform, come to attention, nice loud voice, announce the name of the pattern, and always finish it with a sir or ma'am, depending on who's talking to you, a bow, and then back into position ready. Okay, always try and do this better than the other person, because if the patterns are looking equal, it may be in the minds of the judges that you have come across better all round, and it may swing the vote in your favour. Okay, so that's getting onto the mat. At this point, when you're going to perform your pattern and the judge says jumbi for ready position, that is where you have the option to move your position a little bit to make sure you're going to be able to fit your pattern within the area. If you stand here and jumbi, and then they say sija, and you start and you get to the top end of your pattern, and the judges are sat here and you haven't got space to fit your kick in, and you have to adjust your position, that's going to go against you eventually on the final outcome. So when you've done your bow and they've asked you your pattern and they say jumbi, if you don't think you can fit your pattern in, you need to move to a position where you can start your pattern. They're not going to tell you to do that, you have to do that yourself. So what I would recommend doing is, when you arrive at the competition, if there's an empty mat or a warm-up area, is just make sure you know in your head where you need to start before you get onto that area. So you've done all your preparation. Once you get on the area, you know exactly where you need to be. Okay? You're not going to make any mistakes. Now also, once you start your pattern, this is something that I picked up on from watching people that were better than I was, and watching people that competed a lot more than I did, and I tried to copy what they did, because sometimes I think the thinking in my head was, if I'm doing what the people that are better than me are doing, then I've got more chance of being better myself. So when they say sija, the common thing that used to be done lots, haven't seen so much recently, is to have a small pause before you begin your pattern. And what I tend to do when they say sija, so I take a big deep breath in, and then slowly in my own time I'll begin the pattern. There's lots of different reasons why this may be beneficial. If you're performing the same pattern as the person next to you, if you're both in the same category doing the same pattern, and you slightly delay your start, there's never a chance that they're going to be able to copy you should they lose their concentration or forget the next move. If you're slightly behind, then they can't copy. Okay, so that was a little bit of the thinking as to why I did it, but it is good practice just to take that big deep breath in, ready in yourself, and then start performing your pattern, whatever that pattern is. Okay, so I competed for years and years and years, 20 odd years of doing patterns in competitions and had lots of success. But what I always find when you're doing your patterns is that if you overthink things, you can make mistakes. So before you enter a competition, you need to make sure you not only know your own pattern, inside out, back to front and upside down, you have also practiced your other patterns just in case you get asked to perform a judge's choice pattern. That can happen if it's a draw, or even at some competitions they do that every round anyway. So what I tend to do is make sure I practice my patterns and I know them that well that I can run my pattern on autopilot. So you know, if you know your pattern really well, if you can pick a pattern, I'm going to choose one here just an example, and I can continue talking to you because I don't have to concentrate on what I'm doing. I know this pattern, done it hundreds of times. I don't even have to perform it full power. I'm just running through to make sure I can remember the moves. But because I'm talking at the same time, I can hold a conversation. You can get somebody to ask you questions. It proves that I'm not really putting much thought into doing this pattern. I'm concentrating more on talking and discussing the idea of the concept rather than the pattern, because I know the pattern really well. If you had somebody talking to you and asking you questions, could you continue to do your pattern? Is your body done it that many times you can just run it on autopilot? So I made sure all my patterns I could do like that, didn't have to think about them. And then sometimes when I got to competition, I was always thinking, oh no, what's the next move? Trying to go through it on the day because nerves kick in and you start to panic a little bit. So I got to a point where I'd arrive at a competition and I was performing as a 6th degree black belt, so I had 24 patterns to try and remember, and I'd just get there and I'd just do the first move of each pattern. So I'd go Chonji, I'd go Dango, I'd go Dosa, because I knew if I could remember the first move of each pattern, the rest of it would just load up and run on autopilot. So it's good practice once you've learned all your patterns. When you get to the competition, don't overthink things. Be confident that you're going to remember it and be confident in your own ability. And I would say over the 20 odd years that I competed, I think I only ever messed up a pattern once. And I got quite lucky because after I messed up, the person next to me also messed up and we had to redo the round, and I got it right second time and they messed it up for the second time. So try not to let that happen to you. If it happens, it happens. It might happen to anybody. Just try and practice harder next time and try and improve yourself. Okay, so we've talked about getting onto the area, we've talked about performing your pattern, being confident. When you perform it and you get to the last move, nice loud shout. Shout the name of your pattern louder than the other person shouts the name of their pattern. Be competitive. The judges bring you back to your ready position, and then they're going to have a decision of which one of you was the best, which one performed it best. Could go either way. Okay, the thing is, maybe try and get somebody to video your pattern, and then you can look at areas that you can improve next time. But either way the result goes, conduct yourself nicely, bow to the person, shake hands, walk off as you walked on, and bow. Even if you weren't successful, people remember things. If you're the sort of person and you've been unsuccessful, somebody's been better, they've beaten you, and you just turn around and walk off like this, next time you compete, some of these judges may remember that bad attitude, and you've got to try and make sure you've conducted yourself, even if you're a little bit disheartened with the result, you've conducted yourself in a professional manner. Okay, so lots of different things to think about as you perform your pattern in competition. Good luck.